week on Dig Me Out.
We've had a couple albums like this where there's just one song on the record where as soon as you hear it, like, I don't think I've ever heard this song, but I feel like I've heard it.
Right.
You
It's
know?
so instantly identifiable, and the melody is so universal.
Tim and Jay review 300 by The Stereo.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Dig Me Out. I'm your host, Tim Minichi, and joining me as always, my co-host, Mr. Jason Ziak. Jay, it's episode 173. We are in season 4, and believe it or not, we have another requested review.
Requested review.
This one, Jay, is actually, I guess it's sort of a request review. It's our previous suggestor and winner of our contest over on our iTunes page when we asked people to leave feedback on our iTunes page in the month of December for 2013, and then whoever did, we would throw them into a hat and pick a name. And by golly, Scott Russell Halgrim was the one who we picked. Left us some feedback. So
Did you throw them in a hat or did you throw them in a hopper?
I have like a ball that has a crank on it, and, you know, like an old school lottery
Yeah.
ball. Yeah,
It's a hopper, isn't it?
So it's a hopper, I guess.
I'm going to Google that while you set the show up.
Please do. So we got his request shortly thereafter, and he requested that we check out a band called The Stereo and their album 300, and that's spelled out 300. 3 and then 100, not 300. So add this band to the list of bands which are hard to Google, because The Stereo is a kind of a common word or phrase or whatever, you know. So
when you Google hopper, when you do an image search, you get a bunch of paintings of
Dennis Hopper?
No, like 1950s kind of scenes, and then like nude women in the 1950s.
Was there a painter, perhaps, by the name of Hopper?
Yes, it appears so.
All right. Well, hopefully one of our fans will write in with a detailed history of that particular painter, because I'm drawing a blank on who that is. I would have just assumed it was Dennis Hopper, but I guess I'm wrong.
He didn't show up one time. Yeah, there you go. If you do lottery hopper, you get the little ball with the crank.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
Well, I purchased it from a defunct lottery official, or not official. What do they call those? Not an official. I don't even remember what the term is.
A lotterist.
A lotterist, yes.
A lotteritariat.
Lottitarian. So The Stereo was the pick by Scott. Jay, had you heard of the Stereo prior to Scott?
You know, I want to say it sounds familiar, but with a name that familiar, it's hard not to say that. No, I mean for all intents and purposes here, I don't think I have. The album cover doesn't look familiar. That's for sure.
I remembered the name. I think this is one of those bands where when I was flipping through, you know, CD racks in the late 90s, early 2000s, I probably saw this next to the Stereo MCs and Stereophonics and, you know, various other stereo bands.
Right.
But didn't take an opportunity to listen to them. Luckily, we're going to revisit, and maybe we will right a wrong, perhaps. That occurred in the past. But before we get into the album we're reviewing, let's talk about a little bit of the history of The Stereo.
History of the band.
The band started in early 1999 by former Animal Chin frontman, which was a ska punk band, Jamie Wolford, and then Rory Phillips of the band The Impossibles. So both of those bands were on the record label Fueled by Ramen, and the label suggested that the two get together, do some songwriting, and maybe form a band. And they did. And that summer, they released their debut album, The 300. There were a lot of lineup changes as far as the bass and drums went over the years, including the departure of Rory Phillips. Their second album, No Traffic, came out in March of 2001. Third album, Rewind and Record, June of 2002. The group is disbanded in 2004. Wolford and then bassist Chris Serafini formed the band Let Go. And in 2013, Wolford released his solo album, A Framed Life in Charming Light. The band has gotten back together to play some shows. It's, again, with Jamie Wolford on vocals and guitar, Rory Phillips on vocals and guitar, Chris Serafini on bass, and Sam Hardwig on drums. So if you would like to suggest an album like Scott did for review, please visit our request a review page at digmeoutpodcast.com. Scott was nice enough to give us some Facebook feedback on this record. He says, I'm probably biased, as Jamie Wolford and I went to arts high school together, but I love this album at first listen, and I still think it's one of my all-time favorites. I have a hard time understanding why this wasn't a massive hit. I think Jamie's previous band, Animal Chin, had a fame ceiling in part due to their Fugazi-esque insistence on only playing all ages shows, but I don't know if that policy continued with the stereo. I want to know what an arts high school is. Jay, do you know what that is?
I would imagine it's for kids who are interested in the arts, right?
But like, can you just avoid like history and math and all that stuff at an arts high school? Is it just like there's one class on poetry and one class on painting and one class on mixed media and like that?
Probably.
Is it?
It's probably, and I'm sure theater and those sorts of music and that sort of stuff is all part of the curriculum.
I should have gone to a high school like that. I was terrible at math and geography and science and social studies and foreign languages and every other. You know what my good classes were? Art and newspaper. Those were my good classes.
Yeah, well, me too. I mean, I suppose you probably have to test in some way or another, I would think, and then. But yeah, you know, to me, it's kind of what college is for. But being an art major, this is coming from an art major, but hey, good for them.
Yeah. So let's get into the stereo and their 1999 debut album, 300. Let's do a little what I liked, what I didn't like about this record, Jay. There's 13 tracks. There's a lot of tracks to go through, so I feel like this is the best way to go. Lead us off, Jay. Tell us one thing that you liked about this record.
Hooks.
Yes.
A lot of catchy stuff on here. A lot of really, really strong harmonies. Lots of nice guitar sort of accents and noodles and riffs and things. A lot of energy. And it's all done in a way, though, that's not too precious, precise, exact. It has a raggedness. It has a little edge to it. It has a band feel, you know. It's not overthought and overdone, which helps. I thought a lot of a band like the Knack.
Okay.
Just because, not necessarily a ton in terms of the songwriting, but just from the standpoint that, you know, this is pop rock and it's being presented by a band format, which I just love that idea, you know. You just so rarely hear it now. Even though a lot of the power pop, punk pop that came out in the late 90s, early 2000s, it was so, I don't know, homogenized and so about like big guitar tone, and the drums weren't very incredibly creative, and the vocal was, you know, super produced, and it lost that, I don't know, that feeling of a live band, and the room feel of the production, and a lot of cool like drum accents and things that are pretty fun. And Also, just I guess the last thing that I really liked was just the drums overall. They were fairly creative for this kind of music. I think it'd be really easy to mail in, standard beats and standard fills, or even just doing less accents and fills. I think this type of music, you tend to see less of that, but that was one of the things about the record that elevated it for me, was that the drums, not that they're, it's not progressive rock or something here, but just there's some variety there, and there's some interesting little fills and parts, and it's kind of some cool dynamics and takes on beats and things that I think make it just a little. And maybe that comes, I don't know, drum wise, where this band's coming from, who the drummer is, or how it relates to Animal Chin, but it almost has like a ska kind of sensibility to it in that way, but not in an annoying way. Mm-hmm. How ska drums, at least for me, can be pretty annoying. It just has a little bit of that flavor of being just not a typical, just straight up rock drummer. So, yeah, those are some of the things that I really liked. What about you?
Well, I agree with you on the hooks. I mean, this album starts out with 4 just, blazing pop punk hook-filled songs. And I think that the thing that really hooked me in terms of this record is how fast they get to those hooks. I think in over half the album, the vocal starts less than 10 seconds into the song. And oftentimes they're starting with the chorus, which is just a brilliant way to get you, hooked into the song. There's not like, minute-long guitar intros, or there's a couple songs where they take it a little slower and there's like a piano part. But even in those cases, they get to the vocal really fast. And I think, it's half the album, it's like 10 seconds, and then maybe another quarter of the album, it's like 20 seconds. I think there's maybe only 2 or 3 songs where it takes more than 20 seconds to get the vocal started. Mm-hmm. And it gives you this sense of like urgency, and everything is boom, boom, boom. It's really smacking with the face with like, here comes the next big hook, here comes the next big melody, here comes the guitar part that's gonna like sink into your brain for a little bit. They do an excellent job of just constantly coming up with, like you're saying, there was a this 99, it hadn't happened yet, but there was definitely a saturation point for this pop punk sort of sound that I think a lot of bands were pulling from, equally Weezer and Blink-182 by the late 90s, in terms of that really poppy major chord movement that was happening, almost like a backlash to grunge in a lot of ways, because it was so poppy and so not dour and not depressing. It embraced pop music in a way that grunge music never did. There was obviously hooks and melodies that people gravitated towards with grunge, but it was a much different sort of aesthetic. But with the hooks that are, we mentioned with Blink-182 and Weezer, specifically the first Weezer record I'm thinking of, I could see if you were like 12 or 13 when that first Weezer record came out, and then when this comes out, like 99, 98, you're 17, 18. This is grunge almost is like classic rock at that point for you, in a lot of ways. And then you get the other aspect of it is then you get the emo bands like Get Up Kids and Saves the Day, who are doing their own sort of version of that pop punk with the the emo side of it. So I like that this doesn't devolve into a straight up emo record. There are some aspects of it that remind me of it. I'm thinking like track 6, Ramona, which is one of my favorite songs on the record. energetic as the way that the record starts out, but it has a really good hook on it, and it made me subconsciously think about, and then consciously, I don't know if you've seen the movie Scott Pilgrim versus the World. Jay,
Yeah.
have you seen? So it made me think of that part where he's singing Ramona over and over again, just changing the chords to Mary Elizabeth Winstead. I was actually hoping that was this song, but it was like the full version of that song. But I think there are very few. I think the other thing is there are very few missteps on this record in terms of both how they write the songs, whether the length of the songs. If it feels like it's going to be a short song, it's a short song. You could kind of get that up front, like when that pop chorus hits and it's a up tempo song, you're looking at probably only a 2.5 to 3 minute long song. But then they stretch it out on some other songs. Probably my favorite of those that they stretch out on is Divine, the last track. It's a bit of a departure, but I think it's the best representation of a departure for the band. I think they try it on a couple other songs, and it doesn't work as successfully. But I thought it worked really well on Divine, and it actually shows that they were a lot more than just a pop punk band in terms of their songwriting abilities and talents.
So you're okay with the piano songs?
So Please Try to Understand, which has the Sesame Street kind of beat to it. It didn't really jive with me. I didn't really care for that one that much. And then there's the one, I think it's Problems.
Yeah.
I thought it was okay. It's an all right, middle of the album track. It's not even 3.5 minutes long, so it didn't really bother me that much. But I did like the grandiose aspect of Divine. Like, it has this almost like 70s classic rock feel to it.
Yeah. So I guess the things I don't like would be these piano songs. They just feel, the first one, it's like a Sesame Street song or something. It's just, it goes, or a poor interpretation of Ben Folds.
Yeah, it's definitely a Ben Folds song.
And what it did was, I think the worst part about all three of them, really for me, was that it shows it's all of a sudden exposes the talent limitations of this band. Whereas on the other songs, it's not an issue for me. It's fine. Like, his vocal is fine. It's good enough for the type of material they're doing. They play guitar great, But when they strip down and try to do these piano songs, whether they're serious about them or not, it just raises the question of, his vocal abilities, and the piano parts aren't that good. I mean, they're fine, but they're not, it's not like Ben Folds playing piano here.
No.
And the rest of the band doesn't have as much to do. So you start to lose some of the band aspects, and they start bringing in Problems brings in like a cello, and then Divine gets even more grandiose. To me, Divine sounds like an album track off of a 80s Styx album, which is just so it's so weird. I mean, it's kind of, in a way, it's kind of goofy and fun.
I think if you didn't have 5 and 7, Please Try to Understand the Problems, if you didn't have those on the record, and then Divine was just this like insanely left field closing track, I think it would work a lot better.
I agree. I could get on board with it as kind of a fun way to end the album, and just, like you said, just a total curveball. But the fact that there's three of them on here, you start to question, this is obviously a direction the band's trying to take, and it's not, I don't think, terribly successful. It's not even that the songs are bad. I think actually the songs are pretty decent, which is what makes it weird. So like Problems, I could hear like Superdrag totally pulling that song off, on one of the early albums. It's just this band doesn't have the acumen on this set of instruments and this type of music to pull off the song.
Right.
In other hands, I think they could actually be pretty damn good. I mean, even Divine, like if you had a really strong singer like I said, like, you know, a Dennis DeYoung or something, all of a sudden that song takes on a whole new feel. So that was a big misstep for me. I think there's just vocally, there's sometimes on the record, I guess the only other thing I didn't love was that vocally sometimes on the record the guitars aren't quite loud enough, or the vocals too up front. So like Devotion, the first song on the record, I mean, it's a great song. I just wish the vocal was pulled back a little bit. And there's some other times on the record where that happens, like the vocal just really stands forward.
If you have a moment to spare for me, if you need a friend that I will be, if you need some company, then call me. If you want to see a bad movie, if you still believe you can trust me, if you need a hand to hold, then look down by your knee. No matter what you're going through, no matter what you did or say you do, no matter what it is, I will help you.
His voice is fine, but he's also has some limitations, and he comes up just a tad bit flat when he gets a little bit louder or hits certain notes, and it doesn't bother me at all when it's mixed in with the guitars, sort of in the way Weezer is, you know what I mean? Like his vocal isn't always pristine and perfect, but the guitars are so freaking loud that it's fine. You know, it all works together. There's times in this record where that mix quite doesn't come together right, and I'm left, you know, kind of focused on his vocal. I guess the last thing, I guess in regards to that I would have a complaint about, there are times where it gets really Weezer-esque, like too much, almost. Let me see if I can pull a song out here. Dance to This has some Weezer in it, but I actually liked it. I think You Can't Go Home is a song I have here in my notes that is just too over the top in terms of the sounding like Weezer.
That chorus definitely has. Yeah.
So there's times when that kind of gets in the way of enjoying the record. Just it starts to become a little too derivative for me. But all in all, I mean, that's not. There's no deal breakers there. The songs are short enough too that it's pretty easy to just have fun with it.
Well, it's funny you mentioned Dance to This, because that was one of the songs where I didn't really care for that like clean jangle that he's doing in the verses. It got a little annoying and repetitive, I guess. I mean, it's just going on and on. But when he gets to the chorus and he goes to the halftime, I was like, oh, this is more interesting.
Yeah, you know what? I like that. I think the drums are really cool in that verse, and that's what makes it interesting for me. And then I like that it's one of the few songs in the record where the structure is a little bit different. So they hang on that verse for almost 2 minutes before they come into that big halftime chorus. Most of the other songs, I think, like you mentioned, they either start with the chorus or they get to a hook pretty quick, and so a couple of them even, the verses and choruses are so short, you basically just alternate between the two parts for 2 minutes and the song's over. There may be a bridge or an outro at the end. So right. I kind of dug that there was so much of a focus on the drums and the intro and the verse, and it was so restrained, and then that it opened up into this big halftime wall of guitar sound chorus. It was kind of refreshing at that point in the album that you're 10 songs in. It's kind of nice to hear a format change.
In terms of you had mentioned about the hooks and how hooky this record is, and I also did too. But do you think in terms of a radio band, I feel like it's either like you mentioned with the production, or whether the hooks were really big enough as to why this band didn't necessarily break through? Because 99, that's the prime time to be a band with this sound. What was the missing ingredient, do you think, that Because there were a lot of bands that were doing well with this sort of sound in '99.
I thought a band like Horse and the later band, the Fags, that Horse became, when I listened to this, because the hooks are more of a while it has, you know, alternative, a little bit of an alternative edge to the sort of the production. There's nothing alternative about the songwriting, you know, the lyrics, it's all pretty straightforward pop rock, almost in more of an early, that's what I was saying, like more of an early 80s kind of vibe than a 90s kind of vibe. And that's the way I think of Horse and the Fags as well. So they're more about, I mean, they're closer to Rick Springfield and Bryan Adams than they are to, or the Knack, than they are to Nirvana, you know? So I think that's why at that time this didn't make it didn't, yeah, it's hooky, but it didn't have the radio sound, you know what I mean? It didn't have the stereotypical things you need. You needed to be closer to Blink-182, which has got more of a punk kind of feel to it, even though it's super glossy, you know, even lyrically, and they're not, I don't consider them in that ballpark. You know, the bands that they remind me of were not cool at that time. I'm not sure if they're cool now, but you know, that kind of early 80s stuff, I don't think was the sound of that time. So I, in a way, it's like parts of it are very on par, but I think to some people they could kind of hear it as being a little bit off from what they would expect, or, you know, radio rock at that point. That's my point of view. I don't know.
Okay.
Because it's certainly hooky enough.
Yeah.
Like She Would Never, track 2. I mean, geez.
Oh yeah.
That's one of those songs we've had a couple albums like this where there's just one song on the record where as soon as you hear it, like, I don't think I've ever heard this song, but I feel like I've heard it.
Right. It's so instantly identifiable. Yeah. The melody is so universal.
Yep.
So the interesting thing in researching this record, going off a tangent, is they were on Fueled by Ramen, which I always thought it was kind of a small indie label. I mean, bands like Less Than Jake and Jimmy Eat World and some other Fall Out Boy was on and obviously the two bands that the two songwriters came from, Animal Chin and The Impossibles. I always thought of them as sort of like a middle of the road indie label. If you look at their lineup now, it's pretty impressive. So they have Paramore, Panic at the Disco, Fun, Young the Giant. I mean, those are some, in terms of bands that are, you know, doing well.
That the kids like?
They dance to.
Yeah.
Gym Class Heroes is another one. I've heard of them, but I have not heard Gym Class Heroes. So, Cobra Starship is another one. Heard of them. Haven't heard them, but I know that they're popular with the young folk. It seems like the Fueled by Ramen people are hitting on some pretty popular bands. So just an interesting, you know, I think of Fun and Young the Giant as being two of the biggest, I guess, rock acts, or I don't know if you can classify them in that genre right now.
Yeah.
But you know, it used to be like you knew what labels, like, oh, that band's on Sony, or that band's on Epic,
sure,
or that band's on Atlantic. Like, I had no idea that those bands. Fun's been around for, you know, a couple years. Same thing with Young the Giant. No idea they were on Fueled by Ramen.
I felt like some of those you listed off fall into the like third generation, or, you know, maybe fifth generation emo, fifth generation pop punk genre, though. But there are a few that are outside, so maybe they're, you know, I could see a strategy there where they're staying with what's comfortable or what they're known for, but then also augmenting it with some new stuff that's outside the box,
right?
Their format. But yeah, I mean, that's a pretty impressive roster.
Yeah, I hope they are lining the executive suites at the Fueled by Ramen World Headquarters with gold accoutrements and.
But do you feel like this band would fit in with that, looking at what that label's known for, I mean, does this band fit? Where does this band fit into that?
In terms of them previously having been the home for Fall Out Boy and Yellow Card and Jimmy Eat World, I think that they fit in. The Academy is, some of these bands, I think they fit right in with. Obviously, with bands like Fun or Paramore, I don't necessarily think they fit in with those bands. They're not that far off from, still playing guitars and playing rock music, but just a different take on it.
Yeah, I guess I don't see them as being emo enough to be Jimmy Eat World and not pop punk enough to be Fall Out Boy.
Right, and that's probably where the lack of success came from. Is like, what tour are you putting these guys on?
Yep. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it becomes a little bit of a challenge to figure out what niche they're gonna fall under, and obviously they didn't find the right one. So let's get to our overall review for the Stereos album 300. Jay, would you rate this as a worthy album, a better EP, or a decent single?
I'm at an album. I would trim off the 3 piano tunes. It's going to get you a nice, you'd be at 10 songs there. You'd be pretty short. At that point, the longest song would be 4 minutes. Most of them are in the 2.5 to 3 minute range. I think there's some of the remaining songs that are certainly better than others, but it all fits together really well. I think the remaining material, minus the piano tunes, they all make sense to each other. There's a couple variations on tempo and just writing style. I also think the vocal, we can talk about this, but felt like through the first 4 songs, it almost seemed like there was a different singer at some point, or he was changing his voice enough that it was becoming almost taking on a new sound. It's weird. Like, I think the vast majority of it sounds like the same guy, but there's a couple songs in here, maybe 300 is one, where it starts to sound like somebody else, which is actually, kind of nice for a band that's, for the most part, the songs are very, very similar, very close together in terms of format and style. So,
right.
Yeah, I think you'd have a pretty fun power pop record at 10 songs, and I'd be happy with it.
I agree with you. I'd leave on, like I mentioned earlier, I'd leave Divine on as the closing track and trim off the other piano songs and maybe 1 or 2 of the other ones, which I feel like aren't as strong up-tempo songs as the rest of the record. But I'd be at 9 or 10 songs and be completely happy with this as an album. I think at that point you have such a tight little record that it definitely would be a worthy record for people to check out. So especially those first 4 songs to start out the record are just like boom, 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 to smash you over the head with, these anthems almost. So, and none of them are more than 2:45. I mean, 300, the song is not even 2 minutes long, and
yeah,
I mean, it's just a barrage that they hit you with.
Yeah, there's a lot, like track 2, there's a lot of song crammed in 2 minutes and 30 seconds.
Yeah.
I mean, when you, as you're listening to it, there's a lot of parts and there's a lot of dynamics and a lot of different, it's not just the chorus that's hooky. And when you get to the end of it, it's kind of shocking when you look at the count, because you're like, geez, I thought this would have been like close to a 4 minute long song, but it's not in a way that's like seems, laborious or anything. It's just there's just a lot going on, and it's only 2.5 minutes. It's kind of,
there's a lot of parts, and they move to each of those parts very fluidly.
Yeah.
And they only really play those parts like 1 or 2 times in a row. They go back to them, but they're not playing like, a chord progression 4 times in a row like you would expect in a lot of songs. So
yeah, it's
much more compact,
really tight, really smart. I'm kind of shocked the songwriters here haven't written for other people. I wouldn't be surprised if they did, because pretty good songwriting from a pop rock standpoint. Pretty solid.
Well, Jay, they might have, because sometimes we just don't know it. One of the things I recently learned is that if you have a young child, you might be familiar with the Hot Dog song as sung by the Mickey Mouse Club.
Yeah.
Do you know who wrote the Mickey Mouse hot dog song, Jay?
They might be giants.
They Might Be Giants.
Yep.
Yeah. So there might be a career for Jamie and Rory of Hysteria that we're not aware of, writing Disney anthems or some other, collaborating with various other folks on their albums. But
something else we didn't talk about: harmonies. A lot of good harmonies on this record. I mean, for the lead vocal at times being, it's competent and fine, but it's not like stellar. The harmonies are really good.
Which you got to have on a record like this, I think.
Yep.
To really
definitely
sell that vocal, you have to have those layers of vocals to really punch through.
Yeah, you know what? It made me think of, there's a power pop band from Columbus. I can't think of the name off the top of my head. We played with them a couple times. Anyway, the point is being, I could never get into that band because they're trying to do this, but they don't have the harmonies. And when you don't have the harmony, the choruses just end up being flat.
Right.
It just doesn't trigger, you know what I mean? The right vibe. It doesn't take you to the right place. There's just something, it's a requirement almost to be able to do it. Earwig.
Okay.
You remember that band?
Yeah, good songwriters,
right?
Good musicians, but didn't necessarily have the full vocal complement to pull off the power pop sound.
Right.
You're talking about, yeah, good band in their own right, but not to this level. The last thing I wanted to mention, I was walking through Home Depot this morning as we're recording this morning, and I heard, I think it was SR-71 was the band.
What?
I think yeah. Do you remember the band SR-71?
Oh my God. I'm looking it up now. Barely.
Did they have a song like Dirty Little Secret? Was that their song? Maybe that wasn't the name of the band.
There's an SR-71 on Spotify, and their top song is something called Right Now.
Okay, then so can you look up Dirty Little Secret? Can find out what band sang that?
Dirty Little, isn't that Jackal? Oh, that's
No,
Dirty
it's
Little
not.
Mind.
No, that's not Jackal. Katie is walking out of the laundry room and she is singing that.
Dirty Little Secret.
Yeah.
All American Rejects have a song.
All American Rejects. There you go. And it made me think of this band when we were.
The only lyrics I remember from that song are Dirty Little Secret.
Yes.
SR-71. I can't believe you remember that band.
Them, and the other band that came to mind in listening to this was Hi-Fi. What was it called?
Oh, yeah.
What was the name of that band?
I'm looking it up.
They had that Freak of the Week song.
Yeah. There was
a point where
American Hi-Fi.
American Hi-Fi, where you got your SR-71s and your American Hi-Fis, and they had like one song, and it became like another one of those gold rushes of power pop, or punk pop bands.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, this band was not able to cash in on that. But
American Hi-Fi is one of those bands where it's like they came out of nowhere, and I feel like they had a couple hits, and they were sort of a big deal for like at least a year, and then they just disappeared.
Yeah.
Like what? Okay. Wasn't it was like the drummer from Letters to Cleo or something was the singer in the band? And
for American Hi-Fi?
Yeah.
That was the drummer from Rook Assault. And I think he was also in Letters to Cleo.
Oh, yeah.
Which, by the way, if you watch Parks and Rec, Letters to Cleo just appeared on the season finale of Parks and Rec in a fantastic cameo. Because if you watch the show, the character Ben Wyatt wears a Letters to Cleo shirt multiple times on the show. So in the season finale Unity concert in unifying the two cities of Pawnee and Eagleton, they get Letters to Cleo to play the Unity concert, and he of course wears the Letters to Cleo t-shirt on the side of the stage like a dork.
Okay.
So by the way, next week on Dig Me Out, Letters to Cleo, we'll be doing, no, I'm just kidding. Maybe in the future though. I don't know if we can get them now. See, that's a band I would have liked to interviewed. But now that they've been on Parks and
Yeah.
Rec, I don't know that they're available for a little podcast like us.
Sure.
So if anybody has any ins to the Letters to Cleo camp, let us know. So
They're a big deal now.
Yeah, they're So also featured appearances by Yola Tengo as what was the name of the band? It was like Bobby Knight's Sweater Vest. They played a fake Night Ranger cover band or something like that. And then there was Jeff Tweedy as like a former rock star for a band called Land Ho, who reunited just for the Unity concert. It was quite. If you don't watch Parks and Rec, it's totally worth it for that episode because of all the musical fun that was had.
So when you look up Letters to Cleo on Spotify, their number one most popular song.
Here and Now?
No.
What?
Cover of I Want You to Want Me off the 10 Things I Hate About You soundtrack.
Oh.
Their second is Here and Now.
And Julia Stiles.
Yep. The third is a cover of Cruel to Be Kind.
The Nick Lowe song.
That's that's too bad because they're not getting paid for those.
I guess they're getting,
mechanicals, but that's nothing on on Spotify.
No.
You barely get paid for the period if you strip it down to just the mechanicals. That's not a whole lot of money.
Yeah, that's why cover bands don't make any money recording. It's all about the live performance.
Yeah.
All right,
Anyway.
then. Well, I think we have covered the stereo. We need to thank Scott Russell Halgrim for suggesting this album to us. And if you would like to suggest an album for us to review, head on over to digmeoutpodcast.com to our request a review page. You can see what has been requested and how many spots are left for the year. I think we've already used up half the spots already, Jay. So people need to get their suggestions in. Of course, please consider leaving us some positive feedback over at our iTunes page. We'd greatly appreciate it. Help us get some climb the rankings there. I don't know where we're at, but probably not in the top 10. I think NPR has that covered with all their podcasts. And that's it for us. We want to thank all of our listeners, whether you're listening on iTunes, Podbean, Radio.io, or Stitcher. We appreciate you checking us out. Be sure to check out digmeoutpodcast.com every day for news and updates. I'm Tim. For Jay, we're out, and we'll be back next week with another episode. Dig Me Out.
On the inside,
Join the conversation about this episode at digmeoutpodcast.com, where you can find links to our Facebook page and Twitter feed, as well as links to our request a review and merchandise pages.
It's mine, my heart, my soul, and everything I own. Well, you make it so